I've started the forest machines for the season now. This video is not really gonna be about me actually using them, it's gonna be about the preparations before the season start on the harvester and two small issues. One was on the forwarder, a hose on the grapple burst, but we had a spare one in the machine that it could be easily replaced, so that was not recorded. And it looks very slow when I compare to all the really good machine operators. Even if it feels like I have a good start this season, I haven't had to look at the sheet I have in the machine for what the different button does. I kind of remember everything from last season, so that feels good.
I've tried doing a small improvement to the cab. I'm not sure if you've noticed this in any of the previous videos. I like to twist the seat to step in and out of the machine, but the timber tails I have moved. It used to sit behind there, and then when I adjusted the seat back, when I twisted the seat to get in and out, it would start hitting that in certain places. And to be able to adjust the seat as much as I like, I moved the timber tails to the other side, did a couple of custom brackets here to be able to mount it. This panel comes undone, it's just two bolts, one down here under that black cap, and I think it's one up here that's original holding it in place. It's a little to do with the wiring to this light, and there is some wiring at the bottom here. I'm not sure what it really is doing. I think it has no function in this machine. It might have to do with if you had an extra option with wiper on the side windows or something. I don't think it has any function, but and then I drilled and tapped a couple of holes into the frame here and could mount this setup, and hopefully that will make me able to adjust the seat as I like, because the logging season is about to start.
And we're heading into a very dark season up north with few hours of sunlight, so most of the wrenching will be done in the dark. Was gonna replace the extra water pump that helps feed the coolant up to the top of the cab. One of the hoses going to it connects to the top of the engine, and getting access to that was hard. I was hoping I could reuse it, but it was rock hard, and I could see that it was not really rated for coolant, so I decided to replace it as a precaution. And I had to remove the air filter and then the bracket here holding the air filter. Had poor heating in the cab at times last season, and I want to avoid that, and this old pump also leaks a tiny bit of coolant. The diesel heater can be folded out of the way, and one of the hoses connected to it had been replaced, so it was nice and soft. Earlier when I had issues with the diesel heater, I used some wooden blocks and some screws to clamp off that hose to not lose more coolant than needed. You can see the pump in the middle here, down below. It's hard to get good video footage. It's held in place with 4 bolts with nuts on the backside, so it was a little tricky. And here is the pump taken out of the machine, and it does not have like a mount. It has like brackets onto the unit itself, part of the housing itself, and the new pump does not have that, so we need to get creative and build a new plate and a mount for the new pump. The holes were marked, so it's mounted to the machine and drilled before we cut it to size. Here you can see the new pump. I was preparing some of the hoses that will connect it to the machine. Some plastic material we had laying around was drilled out to create a clamp to hold the new pump in place. Doing some finishing touches on the new mounting solution for the pump. With the new mount in place, I could start looking at getting the pump to fit and get the new hose going kind of under the engine and then up to the top, routed correctly and in place. Plug at the top was pulled out. I still had the wooden clamp feeding the other end of the pump in place, so nothing should start leaking because everything is connected by the pump. Did check the plugs on the forwarder an extra time because I had a little too much metal on one of the magnets, so I will keep track of this one a few extra times before it's time for service. Did install the new breathers on all the bogies without the check valve, so it does not allow any pressure to build up inside them. Hopefully that will stop them kind of leaking a little when they are parked. Some final touches on the water pump on the harvester, hooking up the electrical. That was a plug-and-play solution from the old pump, and tightening everything up and ensuring all the hoses were routed correctly and looked like nothing would take damage from vibration over time. So then the diesel heater could be folded back and the machine was started and coolant level was topped off before closing the hood. Bracket and air filter was installed also, of course. Small maintenance for the garage, dehumidifier I use. I built a custom cleanable air filter for it and cleaned it with fuel, and my gloves did not like fuel, so I would like to have some good disposable gloves that can handle fuel. If you have any suggestions or know of a good brand or material to use for that, leave a comment please. Was still mainly working with the brush cutter when we did the tune up or looked over the forest machine for the season, and starting seeing freezing temperatures. I had issues with the throttle control not acting up. I guess moisture have gotten in there during the summer, so I pulled the new brush cutter apart a little to lube the throttle cable to hopefully push out any moisture in there causing issues. The cable was disconnected and I could feed a hose onto it and a hose clamp and put some proper lubrication in the hose, and then tiny bit of compressed air to ensure that I push out any moisture in there. The old neglected snowmobile was gonna be brought out for the season before it's hard to access where it's parked for the summer, but something dries up in the carbs and the primer during the summer break when it's not used and nobody cares about it. But after filling some fuel inside the cylinders a couple of times, the primers started to kind of grab on a little, and eventually it started. So hopefully it's good enough to just keep working the rest of the season as it has been the last 10 years. Replace the light down here on the cab also. I think this might have been original to the machine. I think some of these xenon lights might have been there for 19 or 20,000 hours. They haven't been used all the hours, but they probably have a lot of running hours on them. One more at the top of the cab was also bad, so that's getting replaced also. Cab was cleaned up and like toolbox in the front. Well, it was close to the garage and I had access to power and a vacuum cleaner. Since the skid plate in the back was down, I did a rough cleanup down there. It tends to collect a lot of debris down there and grease and a little bit of oil, and it's needed. All the fluid levels were checked. I know the front differential is leaking a little and it's collecting in the brake housing. It seems to be mostly leaking out to the left. I had a couple of liters here because I've been filling up the front differential. And since I know where the oil is going, I don't see it as an emergency to do anything about it, and it's a quite big job for a very small leak that's collecting in here. So for now I just top off the differential every now and then and collect the oil before the season. We'll see. If the leak increases, I have to do something about it. Nothing major on any of the plugs on the bogies. The oil does look a little filthy, but it's been parked here for a while and hopefully some of the bad oil has collected at the bottom and it's nothing to worry about. Plug on the front differential also is a little gray, nothing on the magnet. This oil is in contact with the brake discs also, so they probably provide some debris into the oil over time, and earlier I had a little bit of dragging brake that was solved. So, and then the oil here was topped off also because it was a little low even before opening the plug and checking it. All three plugs on the rear axle were checked and nothing could be seen. One is under the skid plate that was checked before that was raised back up, and the other two was nothing, and it needed a little bit of top off after this. The reduction for the swing motor, the oil there looked really good and nothing on the plug, so that's good. It was moved out of the garage, parked in a way that it kind of leans backwards a little, so then I could top off the front differential. I like it leaning back. I can kind of overfill it a tiny bit. The bogies were topped off because they were a little low. The wheels, the hubs were greased. That was not recorded, but it's getting there. Not a whole lot more to do before it should be ready for the season. A new wiper blade was installed on the top window. I'm not sure if it was super bad, but the plastic where it mounts was cracked. It might have get a tiny hit from a branch or something at some point, so it wouldn't stay in place properly. If I wanted to fold it up and leave it, it kind of fell off the machine, so rather install a new one. They are not very expensive. It's just a normal car wiper with the mounting solution, so plenty of options and cheap parts available. Some extra saw bars were added and some chains, and then the oil tank for the saw bar oil was topped off. Hydraulic oil was a little low from wrenching on the harvester head earlier, so started the pump and added about 10, maybe 15 liters of oil to it. Lubricating the harvester head, I noticed two bad grease fittings, so replaced them. The second one I tried to replace just snapped on me. Didn't use a whole lot of force, but I think I have a batch of bad grease fittings, grease zerks, so I threw all of them away that have the same color as this one. Tapping in a Torx bit, it came most of the way out, but then it was like it kind of snagged on something and the Torx bit started spinning. Had to tap it down deeper and got more and more worried this is gonna be a really hard extraction, but my dad came up with a solution to try going back down a little bit before going back out again, and we worked it back and forth a little bit and it came out without too much of a fight. Lucky. Chased a couple of wind-fallen trees first few days and some cleanup next to the road where we're gonna do some improvements in the future, and it stopped measuring the length. So that's the first problem for the season. And I wanted to have the harvester head upright to access the sensor. Apparently quite common that the sensor fails. So most likely it's that. That's what I'm gambling on. And I have a spare sensor that was included with the machine when it was purchased. But the harvester head, I added a pin at the top here to secure it in an upright position. And apparently I ran out of power as I was disassembling this, so I had to clean out the bolts head here. It's just these 6 bolts that holds the measuring wheel in place. If you loosen these 6, you can kind of take out the entire assembly with wheel and all, and disconnect the sensor. And they are held in place with quite a high torque, and they have these Nord-lock washers on them, so it's a little bit of a struggle to break these bolts free. With the assembly in the garage, I could start looking at taking it apart, and I was informed there is some lock ring and a spring involved, so but I checked the parts diagram to get a little better understanding what I was gonna do. 6 bolts to get this lid off and start seeing more of the build up of this. A few taps on the lid and a gap opened up and a screwdriver, and it fell right off. Did not have super good lock ring pliers for this size, and the lock ring might have been reused in the past also, so it caused a little bit of problem, but eventually it came out. And sensor didn't pop out. It's spring loaded from the back to hold it in the correct position, and there is a magnet in the center of the lid that causes it to like generate signals so it can measure the distance. Decided to take things apart and make sure all the bearings here are well lubricated also. Made sure to take some measurements how far down the nut was before this assembly so it can be reassembled very close to where it was at. There is a lock ring solution here because this nut is not super tight. It's just supposed to kind of put a little force on the bearings to have it nice and tight and no slop. Just a gentle tap and then the nut could be unscrewed by hand. Came off very easily. After that the measuring wheels can just be lifted off. Still had to get the sensor out. I have these blind bearing pullers that you can put down, but there is like no lip in the sensor for it to grab onto. Ended up giving it a few taps inwards to make sure it was moving and broken free of any corrosion, and there was a bit of rust under it. And then I reinstalled the blind bearing puller and very gently tapped it, and it started moving out, so I kept going and it came out. Success. Cleaned up the inside, cleaned up the spring that goes behind the sensor. The sensor had an O-ring on it, and the new one did not, but this is not a critical seal for any reason. It just holds dirt and debris out, I would guess, so I simply just took it off and it looked to be in good condition, so I reused it on the new sensor. Did put a healthy amount of grease in there. I pushed more in from the other side also to keep moisture out. Then it was just a matter of pushing in the new sensor and securing the lock ring and ensuring that the spring pushed it back out against the lock ring. Greased the bearings and put the measuring wheel back on. Tightened the nut back on suitable amount. Did check the measurement that it was very close to where it was before taking things apart, and feels like there is no play in there. A few gentle taps on that lock washer, ensuring that it's seated firmly and the nut cannot come undone. Some more grease before putting the lid back into place. Cleaned up the threads on all the bolts. He installed new Nordlock lock washers that it had on them. Also added a little bit of blue Loctite. And with everything bolted back up securely, it's ready to go back into the harvester head. Was not possible to get any good video connecting the electrical back up and starting the first bolt. I almost lost the electrical wire in the arm because it was quite tricky to dig that back out, but once I got it out, my dad helped out holding the wheel itself while I got the electrical connector back up, and then it's just a matter of tightening all the bolts. Did add some extra grease in there to keep moisture out. Had a bit of a struggle getting that rebar that was put in there to lock the harvester head out. I had to get the punch and hit it out from the other side, but ran out of power, but got it out of the way eventually. Since the machine was still warm, it was fired up and tested that this solved the problem, and it did. And after this I did take a few extra control trees and ensure that the measuring of length was correct, and it seems to be just fine. So that's good. Also noticed that I had a missing bolt here that has come undone and was gone, so found something in the garage that would fit that bill. It was actually a little too long, but I added an extra lock nut on the inside. Some of the other bolts here have lock nuts on them, also maybe stripped threads since before. So that's it for this video. It got a little longer than usual. Hope everyone is having a great day. Thanks for watching.